Welcome to the Ultimate Farm Wife podcast. On this channel, we're going to be discussing all things marrying a farmer, moving to the land, and becoming integrated with a family farming operation. Whether you're moving to the farm for the first time or whether you're moving back into a family farming operation, we discuss the ins and the outs of all of it. So let's jump into today's episode.
Hi guys, and welcome back to another episode of The Ultimate Farm Wife. Today we're taking it in a different direction and we've got Sam here on the podcast. Many of you may know Sam from A Place to Call Home. It's a podcast he has himself, as well as the Next Gen Ag Forum. Sam, tell us a little bit about yourself, your family and your farm.
G'day. Thank you very much for having us on. It's not too often I actually jump on other people's podcasts, so I'm very thankful for you getting us on, telling us a story. Look, like you said, name's Sam Prairie. Come from a town in northwest Queensland called Hingleton. We live about 25k between there and another little town called Prairie. My wife and I run cattle on adjustment and lease up this way, as well as we also both work full time. You got the podcast, and I do the forum this year as well. And we also have 3 little kids. So we got Bella, who's 7, Charlie, who's 6, and Lucy, who's 4. So it's a full life, but it's a good one.
Yeah, absolutely. So Sam, let's start right back at the beginning. You came from a property, you grew up through family farming. Let's deep dive into a little bit about what that was like.
Yeah, so I was born and raised on the place that we live next door to now. So my mum and dad are still there, called Railview, just south of a town called Prairie. So mum and dad moved there when I was just after I was born. I was trying to work that out. It was only a couple of months before I was born. So it's cool growing up on a station, as most people, like if they did that. It's amazing childhood, running around terrorizing dad. Usually he's offside most of the time, getting dragged around on the back of a horse if we were mustering. And we were lucky enough that we're only 5k away from a small school. So when I say small, at one point it was me and my sister and another girl there. So it was literally only 3 of us in primary school years. I grew up in a house with my younger sister, Alex, and another one, Anna. But the middle sister, Alex, had a disability, so she had cerebral palsy. So it's a bit of a different childhood growing up in that type of environment, especially in rural Australia. I've faced a lot of difficulties, and honestly, my mum is just a superwoman. Thinking back now to our childhood and stuff like that, like most young people, dad was away trying to help with cash, trying to grow the business and stuff like that. So we did a bit of fly in, fly out with the mines, and mum was home alone. At that point, it's 45,000 acres by herself, checking waters with 3 kids, one with a disability. So it's pretty incredible what she went through, my mum, and I really have a lot of time and respect for her, what she's done. Grew up, went away to boarding school, we don't have any, close to high school is about 40 minutes away, sorry. So, but I had the great opportunity of going away to boarding school in Brisbane. And yeah, it's a pretty radical move, but it was something different to see how the other side lives. But I definitely spent most of my time missing the home and the area out here. I love this area. It's great.
Yeah. And what did you do after school?
I went away and did the horse course under John Arnold at Longreach. So when the ag college was still around, hadn't had experience there while I was doing the horse course. I did 2 and 3 under John. First time around, I broke my arm, nearly ripped it off in a motorbike accident with a horse halter, and ended up going back and having a re-crack at that and finished the last 6 months there and actually finished the 2 certificates, which was pretty cool experience. Like I went back, oh God only knows, I think it was 6 months doing rehab and stuff. And even then I wasn't fully healed when I went back. So they kind of steadied me back into it, which is really good. And I learned so much, grew up so much, which is probably exactly what every boy needs at 17 years old. A lot of kick up the bums. And then I spent a fair bit of my time. I'm just trying to think now. I finished up with John Arnold, and I think mum and dad had a job lined up for me in the Gulf. So I went up there at Boomerang. I was just trying to remember the process of that. Dad rung around and asked a few people, and I was very fortunate enough to land on an amazing station with Fred and Carmel Shepherd. Amazing people. I still, whenever I bump into them these days, I give Carmel a big hug, and, it's so good to catch up with them. And I spent 3 years up there. Same thing, just growing up. I think it was the best thing to do as a young person. Get away from home, get out of your nest, get away from everything, and have a crack for yourself type thing, build up a reputation. And since then, I've really spent most of my time bouncing between places in the territory. I worked a year in there. I did a lot of contract mustering. I worked as a stock agent. I spent most of my time working in the beef industry, northern beef industry. I did spend a little cameo in Townsville as a postie, following the love of my life, my wife, to Townsville there while she was at uni. So I'm not afraid to do something different, but most of my career has always been around this goal of working towards becoming a full-time primary producer and picking up skills and stuff like that would hopefully help me in the future. Yeah.
Yeah, incredible experiences, lots of knowledge gained along the way. So tell us, how did you meet your wife?
Emily and I met at the Stanford races. So it's a bit of a show down about 80k south of here. I don't know, maybe 60k south. It's a beautiful spot, bit of one of those places where ever since we were kids, on school holidays, it was the place to go. I think I was judging the butt wiggling competition at the time, and Emily apparently asked her brother, "Oh, who's that guy?" And I went to school with Huey, her brother, and so I said, "Sam." And anyway, that's where it started. She didn't like me first up. She loves to tell everyone that. Apparently, I don't know what I did, but I didn't do the right thing first time we met. But it kept on blossoming and met and caught up again at the Richmond BNS, which is another town beside here and here. And yeah, that's where it all started. Took me a while to try and convince her that I was all right, but I'm a bit of a rogue, but I'm a lovable rogue. So as I get this, she describes me. So slowly draw her in. So yeah, we've been together now for, oh wow, this is going to test me. 15 years now. So been together for 15 years, married. Oh no, so I lie, 16 years, and next year we're married 10 years. So 9-year anniversary coming up soon. Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing. And so Emily finished uni, and then what came next?
Well, I got a job in Territory working on a station. I was back home for a bit doing a bit of contracting, and that's when we went to Territory in those early years. And we did bounce around a bit. I'm just trying to think now. I was a boomerer. We used to go back and visit each other when I used to go. I drove back from Cloncurry to Townsville, which is a bit of a hike, where she'd come out and visit me. And then I spent that gap, spent a year kind of in between places where I was a postie and stuff. And then we actually moved. I went to Helen Springs in the Territory there, and I was involved in an accident, which we lost the life of a workplace colleague. And incredibly, Emily kind of packed up her stuff and come out and moved out with me and was the bookkeeper there for the year. So she kind of helped me get through that year, and that kind of, yeah, it's a pretty incredible experience. And then from then on, we've always just bounced around together. So we came home after I first finished at Helen, and we worked at the bank. I worked at home for a while, and then that's when we moved. And then after that, we moved down to Roma when the drought kicked in. So we had about an 8 or 9 year drought around this area, and everything dried up. So there was no work, no contract work either. And we ended up moving down to Roma, where she got a full-time job, and I was working in the sale yards, and then moved up to working as an agent. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of working around. Let's double click on the drought. So for a lot of areas, that we know of, when drought hits hard, you either come home and you work on the farm, or you've got to go back to, the cities or bigger regional areas to be able to get work. What was that like for the farm, and how did that make you feel? What was your involvement in that?
At that time, I was just working for mum and dad at the time. I come back after Helen. To premise that, I was in a really bad headspace after finishing at Helen Springs. So it took me about a year or two. I saw a psychiatrist and worked really hard at getting myself back together. I had a lot of survivor guilt, PTSD, that I was dealing with myself personally. So I came back home. I wasn't in a good headspace at the time. And then the drought was kind of building, I would say. Like, it was kind of in that time, 6 year or so. Like, we had years of drought. And I think it's a bit different to when every area is affected differently by drought. Up here, when I say drought, like, obviously it's below rainfall, but our rainfall only happens between December to March period. So we always have a dry period that we manage through. But this was like 8 years of just below average. Some years people only got like 20 mil or something. Like, it was terrible. Some shocking stuff that was going on up here. And for us, like, things just dried up. So cash flow wise, mum and dad, like I said, I was working with mum and dad at the time and doing a bit of contract work. They just said, look, we can't pay you. All my contracting work dried up that I was bouncing around all the properties around here. They couldn't pay me. So I actually did pick up a job in town here for a bit just to try and bridge the gap. And I just wasn't built for that. And in the end, amazingly, Emily was working for NAB at the time and she got offered a full-time job. She was only on a part-time job and offered a full-time job in Roma. And we had to go for it because we didn't have no other income at that time. And like I said, the business couldn't support us. Mum and dad's business couldn't support us at that time. So it was bloody tough walking away. I didn't really like that period. It was a really tough time in our lives. And I learned a bucket load probably from that at the same time in terms of creating off-farm income through investments, passive income, or even like a job of some kind, or even like a off-farm business as such, which leads to what I'm doing now a lot because of those things I learned from there. Where literally we had nowhere to turn to, and we just had to go, unfortunately. So it was a pretty tough moment in our life, but learn a bucket load from it.
Where heritage and legacy intersects with the fashion world. Homestead Road is founded by fifth-generation wool producer Bridget Brooks, built on the values of versatility, quality, durability, and sustainability. Homestead Road's mission is to educate, connect, and celebrate rural women by creating timeless, modern, and effortless wool pieces that speak to the sensibility and sophistication of women on the land. After having her 4 children, Bridget learnt how important clothing and fashion can make you feel after your body and identity changes. Bridget found a gap in the merino activewear market, as many of the other pieces already on the market were either very technical or pretty plain, which is not what her pieces are about. They are effortless and modern athleisure pieces that can be taken from day to night, task to task, as is the busy life of multitasker rural women. Bridget has given the absolutely fabulous listeners and the Ultimate Farm Wife listeners a 40% discount code. Thank you so much, Bridget. That code is Katja40, so Katja, Katja 40, and that expires on the 31st of October 2025. So log on to the website, which is in the show notes below, and get yourself some Homestead Road pieces that will be part of your wardrobe for years to come using the discount code. And Sam, you're probably the first person I've had on the podcast in nearly 90 episodes who have experienced that guilt from when a farm accident or something does happen and there is a loss of life. Do you mind if we touch a little bit more on that?
Yeah, I'm a big advocate for rural mental health, and it's definitely something I think we need to have more communication around. So go for it.
Yes. So without touching on the accident itself, let's talk a little bit more about in the time preceding immediately after. When was it that you knew that you needed to reach out for help? When did you know that, it was, that combination of PTSD and survivor's guilt? Because I think a lot of people try not to classify themselves under those labels and they try not to get help. They try to just trudge through it. So can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, the best way to explain it would be it's not just a one-off thing for me. Like I grew up, like I said, in a household where my sister had disabilities. So it started from the very early days of that, and she passed away before I went to boarding school. So I lost a younger sister before I went there. And the way to think of it is like you've got a cup, and the way I go explain it and when I do talks is you've got a cup, and as you keep getting involved in incidents or things happen in your life, you tip a little bit more in that cup. So that kind of was losing Alex was a massive thing. And it's funny because it's a double-edged sword really for me. Like it's so much pain in that, but also it's really created who I am today. I base so much on who I am as a person and what I do from Alex, from growing up with a sister with disability. But so initially that cup was it, that took up a lot of space. And then I left school. So I also had like several things as all young kids do. Like I was bitten by a snake, nearly got stitched up countless times, broken stuff as a child. So all these little things, like, they all go in there. I left school, involved in that accident where I only ripped off my arm at college. That's probably another big thing to throw in the cup. And then definitely the thing that really, when we were involved in that workplace accident, that really kind of started, the cup overflowed. And I went immediately after, like you run into shock for the first bit. You don't really know. And honestly, I couldn't even tell you the couple of months after. I wasn't in a good headspace during that period of time. And I thank God Emily came up because she really helped me through that period. But I used to go through parts where I didn't know it, but I broke out in the hives. I'd have rashes, I'd have swellings, and no medical reason why I'd be doing this. It's just the stress and strain. I'd wake up sweating, nightmares. It was a pretty horrid year, to tell you the truth. And also I didn't know what I was doing, how to deal with it. I did have like I'd try and do exercise or work out and or find something else. I wasn't drinking as much as I used to. And really it wasn't until I finished up there and got home, I threw myself into work, and I kind of hit this thing where I was either partying hard or working hard. So the two things I'd end doing is I'd go out partying and write myself off, or I'd just work myself to the bone. And then I just crashed. I broke down in tears one day at a dining table. My mum and dad asked me, "Oh, how are you going?" And I just cried, and I was just like, "I'm a wreck. Like, I'm an absolute mess." And really that was the process of starting pulling myself together. There's a lovely family friend of ours who was working with a lady in Townsville that he put us on to, and she amazingly, like this beautiful person, she helped put me back together. And really, like, I can't say any more than that. Like, I had no idea what I was doing at the time. I was lost, and really she just started giving me some tools and tips to try and piecing everything together. And in terms of labeling it, I wouldn't say, like, I don't know, I've kind of learnt to label it now, but at the time you don't really know. No one, like, I had no idea what was going on. I physically, my body was not where it was. Like, breaking out of hives and for no reason and not sleeping and stuff like that, they were tributes of it, but I couldn't exactly pinpoint or tell you. And it wasn't I started putting practices in place and started doing things that really changed everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you mind telling us a little bit about your practices and how
Yeah.
you saw them slowly affect the way that you were going, and how you were able to get back into a good headspace?
Yeah, 100%. I'm all about routine. Saying that, I've been shocking the last 3 weeks because I've burnt myself out, and that's a classic thing. I think we were discussing this before we jumped on. We had that. I'm a classic person where I will go, and then I'll crash, and it's just my personality. I just got to learn to manage that. But in terms of managing, I suppose, mental health side of things is that it's not you won't find a cure. You've just got to find a way to manage it. And my way, everyone's different. Everyone has a different way. But my way is that I've really slowed down. I don't drink as much. Every now and then I'll have a big night with some friends and stuff. But I really manage who I'm around when I'm drinking. Like, I used to love a party, but I really manage it now, who I do drop the guard with, and my safe spaces. I try and eat as healthy as I can. What you put in is what you get out, especially mentally. It's pretty amazing amount of junk food you start eating, and your mental, you're starting a spiral. I try and exercise. I got to get back in the routine again now after this last couple of weeks of get up in the morning or walk or run with the dogs in the morning and work out most afternoons. And purely that's just a mental thing. That is purely to make sure I'm 100%, especially since becoming a dad. I really want to be the best dad I can be. You only get one crack at raising children, I believe. So anything I can do to make me a better person for them is what I aim to do. And the other thing is, and it's a hard one to do, because at the end of the day, we're always tired. You sit on your phones watching Netflix, but I'm a shocker for is I try and get to bed and read just to try and, that helps me sleep better. If I have like 30 minutes reading, beats 30 minutes sitting on a phone any day. And it's not big, it's not huge practices, but there's small things that I reckon are pretty practical that I work on. And I know I'm 100% a better person if I follow those than if I put them to the side. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Reading's a good one as well. It's something I've come back to, especially in the last 12 months, 18 months. And I actually now have alarms on my phone, which tells me to do things at night. So it's like, clean your teeth, get into bed.
Yeah.
And then there'll be
Yeah.
another one be like, no, really, get into bed.
It's a good one. You got to make sure that, because especially and that sleep's the best thing. And it's incredible how much that impacts your health and mental and everything. Yeah.
Yeah. And what was the book title?
It's Sleep. Sorry. It literally is called Sleep. And I forgot the author, but yeah, I've given it out to a couple of people. Yeah. It's in my bookshelf.
Yeah, amazing. So, Sam, amazing journey to be where you are now. You now have a podcast which is called A Place to Call Home, and learning more about your story, I can absolutely see why a podcast with that name would perfectly suit. A lot of time you talk about succession on the podcast as well, and how that is a main contributor to people choosing the option that which way they do go, whether they're going to integrate back into a family farming business, start out on their own, work towards land. Amazing archive of resources that you're building there. Tell me a little bit about your journey and how it ended up going towards that. Did you have a succession struggle yourself? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so thank you for bringing it up. I'm going to be around for about 2.5 years now. I think it's my third year now. So it's only been a couple of years, but pretty well. We went through the classic succession story, and look, we tried one way, it wasn't working. We're actually trying another way now, which is good, but we've had a couple of years break in between. And we were part of the partnership, but we got out. And really, after that, I was completely lost, and I hit another downward, probably depression cycle. And really, I'm someone I like something in front of me. I like planning. I like learning. And really, I just started picking people's brains, and I trying to work out how they did it, how they got through this process that we all get stuck in succession. And one of my mates one day just hit me up and said, "Look, you're good at chatting. You can talk underwater. Why don't you start a podcast?" And I pitched it to my wife, Emily, and she didn't knock it back like most of my ideas. I usually give her 1,000 ideas and one makes it through. But she just said, "Yeah, give it a crack." And literally, I just started Googling and YouTubing, and here it is. And the goal of it is really it's a resource to help the next generation of primary producers. And talk about succession as a key component. First gen farmers is a huge one. Really, it's just I look at any ways people get into primary production, because when we got out of business, we went back to doing it on our own again. So leasing country, just in country, running our own show, and learnt an absolute bucket load in this time since being out. And I really think it's been fundamental. I think on our success going forward is that how much we've learnt since we've gone through. And really, I just want to start sharing it, because once I started talking and doing the podcast, I've had so many people message saying, "Oh God, we've been in the same boat. We've been in this boat," or that relates. And it's been pretty cool hearing the feedback from each episode. So yeah, it's been pretty crazy, and still trying to get my head around it. And I'm still learning. I like to say to everyone, I'm not a journo. I'm just a cowboy from Prairie with a microphone. So that's pretty all the gist of it. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Do you have a favorite episode or one that you keep coming
No.
back to?
They're like children. They're all my favorites.
We're all just gonna have to listen to all of them.
You're gonna have to. I definitely theme it. I definitely theme each episode as a theme, what I try and focus on. So, there's different ones there from the first gen guys who've got into real estate investing, fellas focusing on succession. I've done one recently, which was a big hit, was Melissa Nielsen's up here, like talking about the ladies marrying into farming families, and like very much hit like what you're doing here. Like it was amazing how much that resonated and how many people actually contacted me from that episode. It's incredible, I suppose, that each thing I try and theme and focus on a different topic, and who responds back. I think that's probably been the craziest thing, is some more popular than others, which they all are, but each one I would say I've gotten something out of, and it's amazing to what we've applied in our own business and even our own succession by coming in and trying a different angle with our succession at the moment. Yeah.
Enjoying the ultimate farm life? You might also love this podcast by Katie and Eileen, Barnyard Language.
The Barnyard Language Podcast is honest talk about running farms and raising families, hosted by us, Katie and Arlene, an Iowa sheep farmer and an Ontario dairy farmer with 6 kids, 2 husbands, and a whole lot of chaos between us.
We talk to guests who have life experience that's relatable to parents in agriculture and offer resources, perspective, compassion, a few swears, and lots of laughs.
Whether your farm is a raised bed in your backyard or 10,000 acres.
Whether your family is in the planning stages or you've got a dozen kids.
If you've ever had a car seat in a combine, a stroller in a stable, or you have a toddler or a teen in your tractor, this is the podcast for you.
Subscribe to Barnyard Language today on your favorite podcast platform.
We've got a really big core group of ladies who are listening at the moment who are in the trenches of going through succession, or they're right back at the starting blocks where the conversation is not rolling. It is not happening. It is a word that you do not use on farm. Is there any advice from either your own experience or through the podcast that you would give to them on that? Like, how do you get the conversation going, or how do you become okay with, okay, it's not happening yet, but it will in the future? Or how do you assess, okay, is this direction where I need to be? Is being on farm with no security and no cemented future, is this where I need to be? Is this the journey I need to be on?
That is a huge question, I would say. But and like, I'm not a consultant. I'm just a guy with a podcast. So, don't take this as gospel. But probably the biggest thing I've learned is there's that classic graph where it shows like, a month of pain, 5 years of reward, or 50 years of reward. And then it's that classic thing of maybe 5 minutes of, so it's funny. I suppose point I'm going to get to is it's funny how sometimes that short-term pain can really reap rewards in the long term, whether it is having those conversations, and it's a hard one to start the conversations with, especially when some people don't want to have the conversation. I'm thinking of some generation, the differences generations. But the big thing we learned in our process is like we had to do something to trigger something. And for us, getting out of the partnership was a huge thing, but it was in a downward spiral. It was either we had to change something or we weren't going to have Christmases together. That's the kind of place we were at. And I love my family. I'm very close with my family, but unfortunately, we were one of those classic cases where we went from a very close family to not talking at all. Like we'd rock up to work, not say a thing, and go do our job. And we had to change something. And I'm so happy. My greatest joy is we were at that point and it was falling apart. And getting out of that business, it was bloody tough. It was bloody hard. And coming at this a different angle, like we're back to having Christmases together and actually talking to each other again. And I've got my mum back. I've got my dad back. It would be one thing I would say. And to me, that's more important than anything else. I think in farming families, we prioritize the business so much above family relationships. And look, not everyone's different. Like this probably isn't relatable to some people, but for me, family's everything. To me, I really want those relationships. So sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's tough, but in life, that's life. You've got to do the tough things to get the end result. So whether it is forcing the conversation, whether it is bringing someone in, like I remember when we were really in the trenches, I just said, look, I'll pay for the person. I'll pay for the succession facilitator to come down. And maybe that might be an option for you guys to be like, hey guys, at a family, let's have a meeting. And I've actually paid this guy to come in. I forked out the 20 grand for them to come along and start working with us. But if you look over the long-term benefit, we're running a couple of $1 million enterprises. And, if you look at the long-term scale of making a mess of that in the end, 20,000 is not much. 40,000 is not much. If you look at the long-term pain that can cost, and even that, how much do you put a price on with your kids, talking to your brother and sister's kids? Like family harmony is amazing. You only get one family. So I think you've just really got to chew through it. And I think it's bloody hard. And especially being the outsider in a family, I can fully understand where that comes from. I remember some of the conversations my wife have with me about, broaching topics in the family meetings. But I think you got to work out your unit. Once you get married, like it changes a lot. Like Emily and I, like we're our own unit now. And she's my number one priority. My kids are my number one priority before my family I was born into. And I think that really comes into play as well, because you got to get past, you got to chew that frog is what I'm trying to say. And it might not be good, but you've just got to chew that frog. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So usually on the podcast, I would have guests who talk about mostly from the farmer's wife perspective of those succession conversations. So say usually it would be Emily giving her version of that. So from someone who is the actual family member in the family business going through those succession talks, can you tell me a little bit about what it was that Emily was able to do for you that really supported you through that? Because succession can really put you between like a rock and a hard place. Like you love your family and you love your wife and you want to be able to bring both of them together, and you've sort of got to represent both in the discussions, either, your family and your wife with your mum and dad, or, vice versa. It's a very complex place to be in. None of us have training in this. What is it that helped you, and what is it that she did that really stood out when you look back at it and when you're about to go back into those conversations again that really helped?
Ooh. Another tough one. Hopefully I won't mumble as much as my last answer, but I'm going to flip it a little bit. Probably first off, what I did, and then I'll put it on Emily, is what I did is I actually started doing professional development and personal development, and that hugely changed how I communicated. in the family business, and even the understanding where the angles of personalities and how we come into those things, which anyone in a family business should do. And even Emily participating in it as well, like we had a better understanding of where we're coming from, but definitely how I communicated, which definitely needed a lot of work initially. But in terms of Emily, I would say, like, I look back now and I just say, holy, like, I don't know how the hell we got through part of it. Like, Emily was absolutely incredible. Like, as most people in family businesses are, like, we were living on drawings. I look back and I shake my head because I don't know how the hell we did it. But like, we lived on drawings where it was to the point where Emily had to go back to work pretty quickly after after the first two children because we didn't have enough to pay for nappies. And like, I look back there, shit, you're gonna make me cry. But I look back there and I think about how hard that was for her as a young mum, and I really regret a lot of that because I wasn't there for the first 6 months of my first daughter's life because we were going flat out on the family property, and I really regret those 6 months because of how much strain it was for the first child she went through. And then literally 6 months in, went back to work part-time because we needed cash to put nappies on the bub and do all that and pay for formula and all the rest of it. And, you know, I can't thank her enough for that. We talked about it, but yeah, like, and then even the second one, when Charlie was born, like 16 months later, and a very tight gap, same thing. Like, we were still in the process of in the business. And, you know, I did take time after each child, but then literally same thing. I went back working, and Emily, once again, a couple of months in after he was born, went in. She was actually the point where she was working in town here as a bookkeeper, and she had Bella in the chair on a mat in the little corner while she was just getting paid a bookkeeper's wage and stuff. Same thing with Charlie. Like, I can't believe some of the stuff we went through looking back. We always shake our heads, but I think through that, I appreciated that. Like, it's all I say is I'm so thankful and amazed I married someone so incredible that did that. And like I said, like, I really regret we had to go through that. But there's sometimes you got to do that in life. You got to get through the tough times. Like, shit, we were down to where we had $50 in our account. Well, you know, those points when breaking points hit. And, you know, like, the support she still gave to me when I had a bad day coming back. And it was a breaking point in the end for us. Well, probably one breaking point, and definitely the tipping point was when I couldn't, like, we had an argument in the family because they wanted me to do a killer and I wanted to go to my daughter's dance practice. And I just got told, you're going to make sacrifices in business. And I just went, that was it for me. And, you know, the support I had for Emily every time, the support was amazing through every decision I've ever made. When our backs were against the wall and things were falling apart, we said, oh, well, that's, you know, she's like, we can pack up and go anywhere. We don't need anything. We can just do it. And that's all I could say was the support I had, where I knew us getting out, especially getting out of the partnership when I was shit scared of how we're going to feed 3 kids because the girl is pregnant again, and continue putting a roof over her head and stuff. And she's like, don't worry, we got this. Like, you know, that's all I needed. That's all I needed to hear. Because, yeah, looking back, like, I shake my head, but we had to go through it because of what we've achieved now and to see what she does now. She's an amazing mum, what she does for the kids and stuff, and what she's done for the kids. And I don't think no one will ever really appreciate that, but I see that. I see it in her. I see you if you're listening to this, Emily. I really appreciate that because shit, I couldn't have done it alone. Yeah, that's all I could say on that. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing strength. And I think for many of our listeners, just like Emily, I think a lot of us just do it. And it's so lovely that, you know, you do see her and you do acknowledge that. And I really hope that for a lot of our listeners, they have that as well. They see, and someone sees you, we see you, we see what you're doing, we know what you're up to. So thank you so much for that, Sam. What would be, you know, your closing advice to anyone who's listening to the podcast who is, you know, trying to integrate into a family farming business or back into a family business? Anything that you would say to them?
Well, so far this conversation has not gone anywhere like what I thought it would go. So, and my usual advice, to tell you true, I'd try to think of, like, I suppose, your audience that you've got And I understand that most of it is the mothers and the partners and stuff like that, and sometimes probably two things. Coming from a husband in a farm family, it may not seem like we see you or what you do, but we do. Men are terrible at communicating. We all know that. We're terrible at our feelings and telling our feelings. Like, we're built differently. We're not made like females. You guys are amazing at what we do, and we mean to say that. So all the husbands and stuff out there, we generally do appreciate everything you guys do. I know that no one says that enough, but like, it's incredible the amount of stuff that goes on at home, that you guys keep it all together. But it's that classic bush male thing. Like, we don't communicate enough. Would be one thing. I just want you to really know that you guys are appreciated. I know your husbands would want to know that. We just don't know how to say it properly. And probably the other thing on a different angle is, when it comes to succession or business, or no matter what, the best thing you can do is continually developing yourself, whether it is how to communicate, where it is working on different business skills. No matter what, you've got to keep on upskilling yourself. And recently, what I found is, with doing the podcast, is I've had a massive increase in the amount of people always ask for the last piece of advice. And the biggest thing that's come through is people focusing on personal development. And that's been a huge game changer, I think, the last 10 years. Is everyone is more open and more keen to work on themselves. I know it's always been there, but there's more people doing it these days. And I think it's incredible to see that people are wanting to better themselves, not just their business.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice, Sam. So I'm sure that a lot of my audience would love to connect with you online and with your podcast. So where can we find you?
Yep. You can find us anywhere. Just type in A Place to Call Home. I pop up on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. You can check us out and let us know what you think. I'm always open to people. I'm a big believer in learning. So if you've got any ideas or anything like that for guest recommendations or whoever, just shout out. I'm always open. And look, thank you very much for having us on. It's been a great conversation. Definitely was not what I thought it'd be, but it's good anyway. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks for listening to another episode of The Ultimate Farm Wife. If today's chat has made you smile, nod, or feel a little bit more seen in this wild rural life of ours, share it with a mate, hit the follow button, and leave a 5-star review where you watch or listen to this podcast. It's the best way to keep growing this community and showing your support for the Ultimate Farm Wife podcast. A big thank you to the crew behind the scenes who are helping keep this show on the rails. To our show editor, Krista DePathra at the Rural Podcasting Network, and Lou and her team at the Administration Agency, and of course to yourselves who tune in every week. Until next time, keep your hearts full, your boots dusty, and your sense of humour close. Before you go, if you've been loving these farm life chats, I'd love for you to join me over on my other podcast too. It's called Absolutely Fabulous, where we dive into agriculture beyond the headlines and bridging the urban-rural divide. We'll deep dive into big conversations in ag, from the challenges to the highlights and what's shaping our future. It's a space where honest stories, laughter, and a good dose of farm life real talk goes on. So make sure to head to the link in the show notes, subscribe to the Absolutely Fabulous, and I'll play the intro for you now.
Hi, welcome to Absolutely Fabulous. My name is Gillian Fennell, also known as Station Mum 101. I love everything about agriculture, especially the people, and especially communicating about what makes Australian ag so special.
And I'm Katja Williams, a beef, cattle and cropping farmer, and I love all things ag, and I'm also known as the Ultimate Farm Wife. Together, we are absolutely fabulous, and we are talking all things agriculture beyond the headlines.
And we can't wait to give our opinion to you, and we hope you enjoy it.